So good morning, back in the ZC33S, this Sport Hybrid. So today we will discuss this foundering car, what makes the car a fun car. So I will give you the lowdown, what makes a car a fun car in this video. And there are several factors to consider. First of all, a fun car should put a smile on your face. That's the definition of fun, and should also be with little to no restrictions. So for example, if a fun car is extremely fun when it works but it's breaking down all the time, this is not a good thing, of course. Okay, let's begin. First of all, you need a little bit of power. It can be a bit, but can also be a large amount of power, but especially as a rule of thumb, I would say get at least 100 horsepower per 1,000 kilograms of weight of the car. So that's a good sign that this will not make your car a fast car, but it will make it a warm car at least. So that's the thing. The other thing I would always recommend is to get a light car. So a lighter car gives you more feeling to be connected with the road, also more sense of speed, and it will brake nicer, will go through bends a lot nicer. So that's a real recommendation to consider. Another thing to consider is to get a car that is reliable, as I mentioned, but also functional. So a car that you can use for many purposes, but also does not break down on you. So when that is all said and done, a reliable car in general, if you get a Japanese or this day and age Korean cars, they are quite reliable. I'm not slanting that the German cars or other brands or nationalities of cars are not so reliable. But in general, the Korean car and especially the Japanese have a long history of building very reliable cars. So that could give you an indication, but you can also see the user experiences of the specific type of car that you are looking into, and also the weak points of the car. Next, I would always recommend to get a car with disc brakes all around. So oftentimes car comes with, especially very light cars, they come with disc brakes at the front but not at the back. Good brakes and good disc brakes all around are a very good attribute, because it will make the car safe and also will brake better. Next, get a car that is attainable. And why is that so important? So if you have a car that's attainable, you have the benefit when you want to acquire it that you can. So that's one thing. The other thing is that when you have an attainable car and something does go wrong, you still have a car that is not that expensive to repair. So you will have more joy and less worries. Another thing to consider, but that's especially depending on what kind of driving you want to do with this type of car, is the mileage. So if you are driving long distances, it could be a good thing that you have a car with is a little bit more frugal, so it doesn't need as much energy over that distance. But if you only drive now and then that frugality is not that much of an issue anymore, because it is only once in a while you only drive that fun car then for how do you say that? You drive then that fun car only for that pleasure drives, which can be quite low. So some people only drive like 5,000 kilometers a year with their fun car, and of course then the mileage is not a big issue anymore. Another thing to consider is, as I mentioned, I said a car that can be used in many applications, so also can serve as a daily, is in my opinion a car that is more fun than a car that you can only use for that pleasure drive. Even though that car for the pleasure drive might be even better for the pleasure drive. And why is that? because if a car is usable in many different aspects, you will use it more, so you will enjoy it more because you have more time in the car. That's a big factor. But also, even if you have, for example, two cars, one car for the daily stuff and one only for the fun, if the daily car breaks down and you're forced to do the daily chores also with your fun car, you will be very happy if that car can do it and will just manage. So even though it might not be the perfect car for that situation, if it's working with you, that's a better thing than it's working against you. A last thing to consider is what most people don't consider, but I will show you this. If you get a car with relatively narrow tires, this will mean that the car will have a little bit less grip, but it will be also more playful, so you will feel it slid away a little bit more, so more interaction. Whereas if you have a car with extreme grip, this will of course mean that the car has wider tires, but it also will make the car less fun to drive and less eager to turn in, so you will feel more resistance. Also, that more resistance will often mean that the car will have a slightly lower top speed, but also higher fuel consumption because you have more rolling resistance. And the car with narrower tires also normally has less cost when you have to replace the tires again. So that's a fact to consider. And I will give you a few examples. This is a Swift Sport. If you compare it to, for example, Polo GTI, which is in the same B class, the tires on this car are a lot narrower, and it will feel a lot more lively, more like a puppy to play with than, for example, Polo GTI does. Another example is the Lotus Elise. If you compare that to, for example, a Cayman or 911 from Porsche, those cars have a lot wider tires, and the Elise will feel a lot more playful. It's not only because of the lower weight that it feels so much more playful, but also because the tires are a little bit less bulky. Another example you will find in the Alpine A110. Not only the old version, but also the current version has, for a sports type of car that it is, not that extremely wide tires. And extreme wide tires will give you ultimate grip, but will not feel as playful as I mentioned. So that's that again, and if you compare all those cars, you will also feel that there is, next to the a little bit narrower tires with good compound still, so they are still very grippy. It could also be that, for example, you get at least as good cornering speeds in the Swift Sport as you would get from the benchmark, the Fiesta ST, which has a lot wider tires but also is a lot more bulky. So it does not mean that you don't get a car that can be exploited, because they can be exploited more, in my opinion. But the sensation of losing a little bit of grip and being very playful is just adding to the fun car appeal. So next to that, they all have a very light weight. So if you compare them with other cars in that class, they all will be on the lighter side. So that brings me back to that part of the fun equation. So I'm done with my ride. I use my fun car also to put the children and their stuff in it and bring them to school. Have a great day. Foundry Car out.